When my parents raised their glasses to toast my brother for being worthy of inheriting everything, a stranger stepped forward and placed an old wooden chest in front of me. He said calmly, "If you open this, your family will never be the same again." I sat there, surrounded by the clinking of glasses, crystal chandeliers, and satisfied laughter, like an uninvited guest in my own bloodline. Mason, my older brother, had just been handed the company, the estate, and the title of rightful heir to the Prescott legacy. Me. I got a condescending smile from my mother and a whisper dipped in poison. "Dreamers belong in the art room, sweetheart. Not at the head of the table." I thought that was the end of it. Until a man walked in. A worn brown suit. Familiar eyes. It was Henry Blackwell, my grandfather's private attorney for over 30 years. In his hands was a wooden chest, carved with a symbol only I would recognize. He set it gently on the table and tapped it 3 times. "This," he said, "is what Mr. Charles Prescott left for Evangeline. For her. And her alone." My parents' eyes flickered. My heart thundered in my chest. Inside that chest, was it an inheritance? Or a secret powerful enough to shatter my family's perfect mask? I drew a deep breath, staring at the chest in front of me. Then slowly I looked up at Mason. He smirked, triumphant. As if Father's declaration had sealed the final prize in his favor. But he had no idea. The real game hadn't even started yet. The Prescotts had long been described by Vermonters with glowing words: tradition, prestige, real estate empire. Since childhood, the local paper often ran photos of my father, Gregory, and my mother, Vivian, beaming beside Mason, their eldest son. I appeared in some frames too, but usually at the edge like an unimportant ornament. Mason had been the center from the start. He was clever, outgoing, gifted at saying the right thing and pleasing our parents. Every step of his life was meticulously planned. Prestigious boarding school, Ivy League graduation, then returning to work at Prescott Realty. Whenever he appeared, my parents came alive. They introduced him to partners, took him to events, endlessly repeating the phrase, "the rightful heir." I, however, was different. I loved sketching houses, not mansions but modest, energy-efficient homes in harmony with nature. Since high school, I had been drawn to the idea of green architecture. Instead of cocktail parties, I spent weekends with the environmental club, picking up trash by the lake or meeting friends to discuss recycled wood cabins. To my parents, it was a disgrace. "Evangeline is never practical," my mother once said bluntly in front of relatives, her smile intact but her tone sharp as a knife. "While Mason is building a career, she's wandering job sites, doodling things no one will ever pay for." I had grown used to the comparisons, but they always stung. My grandfather Henry was the only one who saw me differently. He never laughed when he found me hunched over drawings of tiny cabins, nor scolded me when I carried a potted plant into the living room to test the light. He often said, "A house is more than brick walls, Evangeline. It's a place that keeps the truth. Build with honesty and it will outlast everything else." Those words were etched into me, especially when faced with my family's favoritism. That afternoon's family meeting in the estate only stripped the illusion bare. Mother leaned toward Mason, her eyes glowing with pride. "Son, from today, it all officially belongs to you. Your father and I believe you will carry this legacy forward. Take Prescott Realty to new heights." Mason smiled, adjusted his tie, and made sure to glance at me. "I won't let you down." I let my hand rest on the chest. The touch seemed to thicken the air around us. "And what about me?" I asked, forcing calm into my voice. "Do I have no place in this company or legacy?" Father looked at me as though I had asked something absurd. "You have your own life. You chose green architecture, a strange road. I won't forbid it, but don't expect Prescott Realty to be your testing ground." Mother added, "Inheritance isn't for dreamers. Mason understands what reality is, and you—" She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning filled the room. Grandfather's lawyer still stood there, his eyes scanning each face. When they met mine, they were steady, reminding me this chest was no game. I remembered summer afternoons when my parents took Mason to the riding club, while grandfather drove me in his old truck to the woodworking shed. He let me saw scraps of wood, taught me to join them into window frames, explained how natural light could transform a room. He told me without hesitation, "You have a different eye. You see what others overlook. Never let anyone convince you that's worthless." Those memories burned like hidden embers, keeping me upright amid the scornful stares. So what's in the chest? Mason shrugged, voice laced with challenge. A few worthless trinkets? My little sister probably loves old junk. Mother chuckled along, lifting her glass as if it were all amusement. Father stayed silent, but the deep crease in his brow showed he wished the chest gone already. I laid my hand on the lid, feeling the scratches, the layers of dust. Traces of time, left by a man who had seen through every illusion in this family. Every gaze fixed on me, but not from curiosity about what grandfather left. They feared it might hold meaning beyond their control. I pulled the rusty latch. The metallic click echoed sharp. When the lid creaked open, the smell of old wood and damp paper drifted out, recalling the attic where grandfather stored the mementos mother despised. Inside were no jewels, no antiques, but a bundle of faded sketches, some yellowed papers tied with twine, and a thick envelope. I touched the sketches gently. The faint yet precise lines revealed detailed plans of the Prescott estate. Beyond the familiar sections we lived in, faint lines stretched downward. Maps of underground tunnels. Oh, come on. Mason burst into laughter, his voice booming. A pile of scrap paper. This is what you call a legacy. Evangeline, keep it to sketch your imaginary green homes. Mother smirked, raising her glass as if this proved her right. Father cleared his throat, firm. Henry had a habit of keeping nonsense. Best to leave it alone, no need to waste time. Quietly, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in his familiar slanted hand. Evangeline, the truth of this family lies in these bricks. You must find it yourself. Don't believe what they say, look at what they hide. Your grandfather, Henry. I read in silence, each word carving into my mind. When I looked up, Mason's mocking gaze met mine. Planning to dig up the yard for treasure? He sneered. Maybe he left you a few fossil bones. The family chuckled softly until I set the letter on the table and spoke, calm but resolute. If grandfather said there's something to find, then there is. Mother frowned, setting down her glass, her voice sharp. Evangeline, don't start with these fantasies. Mason is the heir. No one has time for old sketches. All my life she had seen me as weak, quick to quit. But this time, something inside refused to bow. If they're meaningless, then why did grandfather leave them for me? I asked slowly. Why not give them to Mason or to you and father? For a moment, Mother's face faltered, though she quickly regained her cold composure. My father scoffed. Simply because he pitied you. The old man wasn't in his right mind at the end. I gripped the edge of the paper, my heart pounding. Grandfather may have weakened with illness, but his mind had always been sharper than anyone else in this room. I knew that better than anyone. That night, after everyone had drifted away, I carried the bundle of sketches back to my room in the estate. I spread them across the desk under the dim yellow lamp. The lines came into focus. A hidden passage starting from the West Library, winding down into a space marked with a single letter H. Henry. Grandfather had signed with his own initial. My hands trembled as I traced the lines, memories rushing back. As a child, I once asked him, why are there so many locked doors here, so many rooms no one enters? He only smiled, patting my head. Every house keeps its own truth. When the time comes, you'll know. Now those words felt like the key leading me underground. The next morning, as I stepped out of my room, Mason was already waiting in the hall, arms crossed. You really mean to chase that underground nonsense? He asked, his voice laced with scorn and disbelief. Yes, I answered. Because grandfather wanted it. Mason laughed, leaning close to my face. Evangeline, wake up. He gave everything to father and mother. The rest is mine. You'll never have a place in this family. I looked at him, my voice steady. Then why worry if I'm only chasing after a few old bricks? He froze for a beat, then ground his teeth and stormed off, leaving a bitter weight in my chest. That afternoon I slipped quietly into the library. Sunlight streamed through the glass, painting the towering shelves with light. Following the sketches, I reached the west wall. There, beneath the thick rug, was an odd seam. I bent down, lifted the rug, and found a narrow gap, just wide enough to reveal a wooden hatch sunk into the floor. My heart hammered. I tugged at the rusty iron ring. The hatch lifted, dust billowing into the air. A spiral stone staircase descended into thick darkness. I stayed motionless for several seconds, hearing my own heartbeat, remembering the last line of grandfather's letter. You must find it yourself. And I knew I was stepping onto the threshold of a truth that could change everything. Darkness swallowed me as I descended the mossy stone steps. The echo of the wooden hatch closing above sealed me off completely. I switched on the small flashlight I had brought. The dim yellow beam swept across rough brick walls, cracks etched deep with time. The underground chamber was larger than I imagined. Rows of old wooden shelves stood in order, so thick with dust that each step stirred the smell of mold and rotting paper. I swept the light across the rows, catching sight of countless pressed wood boxes, carefully labeled, Prescott Foundation, Confidential. I froze. Foundation. My parents had never once mentioned that name. For them, everything was Prescott Realty, the real estate company that built the family's power. But grandfather, he had hidden something entirely different here. I pulled out one box, brushing away layers of dust. Inside were dozens of tied bundles, neatly dated across 3 decades. I opened one, my eyes locking on a number, $20 million. I gasped, my palms turning cold. The records explained everything. The Prescott Foundation was a charity grandfather had established decades earlier, operating anonymously, funding community projects and environmental research. He had kept it hidden, likely knowing his daughter and son-in-law would never agree to spend money on anything that didn't turn a profit. I flipped further. Page after page showed transfers, scholarships for poor students, budgets for community centers, support for local hospitals. My chest tightened. This was grandfather's true legacy, the one he had fought to keep beyond my parents' reach. But when I reached the most recent file, my hands shook. The entries were clear. Withdrawal, Gregory Prescott. Multiple sums, each hundreds of thousands totaling several million. Notes, debt coverage. I collapsed onto a dusty wooden chair, my chest constricting. Father had drained money from the charity to cover his personal debts. Worse, he had done so after grandfather had fallen ill. In my mind, grandfather's voice echoed, warm and patient. Don't believe what they say, look at what they hide. I snapped photos of every page, my heart racing. Suddenly, footsteps sounded above. I quickly switched off the flashlight, straining to listen. Evangeline. Mason's voice carried down, mocking. Still down there? Don't tell me you're treasure hunting. I held my breath. His shoes thudded across the library floorboards. Then silence. I didn't move until I heard the library door close. I turned the flashlight back on, my hands trembling, and opened another file. Inside was a handwritten letter from grandfather, dated 3 years earlier. If one day Evangeline is reading this, then the truth has surfaced at last. Gregory has borrowed beyond his means, and instead of facing it, he used the foundation's funds to cover it. You must know this, for sooner or later it will stain the family's honor and the true legacy. Remember, not every wall is built to protect. Some are built to conceal. If you have courage, tear them down. I bit my lip, my throat tightening. Grandfather had seen everything, but instead of confronting it, he chose to wait, for me. When I returned to the living room, Mason was lazily pouring wine. Father sat in his armchair, his eyes narrowed as though calculating something. Mother still wore her half-smile, but her fingers tapped the chair's armrest, her sign of unease. Took you long enough, didn't it? Mason drawled, his eyes gleaming with mockery. Find any earth-shattering secrets? I set the box of files on the table, my gaze locked on Father. Yes. I found a charity called the Prescott Foundation. Grandfather created it. It's worth $20 million. The room fell silent for several seconds. Father shifted in his seat, a flash in his eyes quickly masked. Nonsense, he snapped. Henry never told anyone about that. He didn't because he knew you'd never allow it. I opened the file, showing the stamped and signed pages. But here's the proof. Mason raised his brows, but before he could sneer, I turned the file to the page signed Gregory Prescott. And here, I said, enunciating each word, are the withdrawals you made to cover your debts. Father's face blanched, but then he let out a dry, brittle laugh as if to break the weight of the truth. Those sums were temporary. Every family faces financial strains. Mother rushed in, her voice sharp and shrill. Evangeline, you don't understand. Those numbers are nothing compared to preserving our reputation. I cut her off, my voice shaking but firm. Reputation cannot be built on stealing from a fund meant for the community. Grandfather knew everything and he left the truth with me. Mason, unusually silent, stared at our parents as if seeing them for the first time. Is this true? He asked, his voice uncertain. Father said nothing. Mother bit her lip, her eyes sliding away. Father slammed his hand on the table, the sharp crack making the crystal glasses rattle. He shot to his feet, his eyes blazing, his voice thunderous in a room that had always demanded composure. Stop digging up the past, Evangeline. This family stands today because of my decisiveness. Without me, we would have nothing. I didn't blink. Fear still pulsed inside me, but on my lips rested a strange calm. Decisiveness, I said slowly. Or abuse of power and betrayal of grandfather's trust? The question struck like a blade. Father froze only for a moment. His jaw tightened, his voice cracked. I did what was necessary. This family cannot crumble over Henry's vague principles. Mother cut in, her tone icy, every word hissing through her teeth. You don't understand, Evangeline. If you dare take this outside, the first one destroyed will be you. No one will believe an outsider like you. You'll lose everything you have and there'll be no way back. I turned to her, my eyes burning, my voice still controlled. What do I have left to lose, Mother? I've already been cut out of the inheritance, mocked my entire life. I haven't had a place in this house for a very long time. Mason broke in with a derisive laugh, leaning back in his chair, arms folded in arrogant ease. And who do you think will believe you? A poor architect sketching energy-efficient houses? While father is a renowned lawyer, mother is a socialite, and I am the rightful heir. You have nothing but scraps of paper. He paused, tilting his chin toward me, his smile dripping with arrogance. You should know your place. My place isn't for you or our parents to decide. Grandfather left this truth to me, and he trusted I had the courage to face it. Are you so afraid of that, Mason, that you have to laugh at me? Mason scowled, letting out a harsh laugh, though unease flickered in his eyes. My father stepped closer, leaned down, his voice low and hissing. Evangeline, I warn you. No one knows about that fund, and it will disappear if you're not careful. If you expose it, you'll drag the whole family into the mud. I rose, the space between us no more than a few feet. You dragged the family into the mud long ago when you drained the charity fund to cover your debts. I only uncovered the bricks you tried to hide. His eyes flashed with fury, his hand curling into a fist, but he stopped himself, turning away. My mother got to her feet, laying a hand on his shoulder, but I saw her trembling. Mason shot up, his voice arrogant. Enough. I won't let you destroy this family. If you mention that fund again, I'll make sure it's taken care of immediately. Taken care of? I repeated, my tone icy. You mean destroy the evidence? Aren't you afraid that one day it will all come out and then you'll be the one who helped them? Mason faltered, then forced back his bravado, though his eyes no longer held their certainty. I quietly gathered the files, the rustle of paper slicing through the heavy air. Mother glared at me, her eyes mixing fury and dread. Evangeline, you'll regret this. This family has its own laws. If you choose to defy them, don't expect forgiveness. I clutched the files tightly, answering softly, I don't need your forgiveness. My father roared, but his voice had begun to tremble. You don't know what you're doing. No, father, it's you who doesn't understand. Grandfather saw everything and he knew who deserved to carry on the legacy. I turned and walked out, leaving behind their stares, burning with anger, confusion, and fear. Mason's voice chased after me, each word clipped. You'll never win, Evangeline. I stopped at the doorway, glanced back, my voice calm but resolute. I don't need to win. I only need the truth exposed. The heavy wooden door shut behind me, leaving the room cracked in silence. I returned to the underground chamber on a cold gray morning, the estate still steeped in stillness. The flashlight's beam cut through darkness, sweeping over the old brick walls. I followed grandfather's sketches, stopping at what seemed like an ordinary section of wall. But the bricks there looked slightly misaligned, their color darker than the rest. I tapped lightly, the hollow echo made my heart pound. I searched carefully, finding a small gap wide enough for a fingertip. After several minutes of effort, the whole section of bricks gave way, revealing a gray metal door coated in dust. A safe. On its face was a number dial. Thinking. A birthday, the one thing grandfather never forgot. Not once did a year pass without a handwritten card from him. I drew in a deep breath, turned the numbers. A sharp click echoed. The safe swung open, revealing a small wooden box and several aged cassette tapes. My hands shook as I lifted the old recorder, slid a tape inside. Static filled the air, then Grandfather Henry's voice came through, warm, steady but weary. "One day someone in this family will hear this. I discovered Gregory and Vivian. They exploited the Prescott Foundation to pay debts. I have the evidence, but I chose silence. Because I knew if I confronted them directly, this family would shatter. I waited for someone with courage to step forward." A cough interrupted him, then silence. Another man's voice followed, perhaps an old partner of his. "Who do you plan to entrust it all to? Mason?" Grandfather's reply was firm, though faint. "No. Mason may be clever, but he is too much like his parents. He loves power more than truth. The only one I trust is Evangeline. She may not fit this family's mold, but she has a heart. And courage." My chest tightened. Hearing my own name from his lips, I felt a chill down my spine. I closed my eyes, tears spilling freely. He had known everything, had chosen me long ago, but was forced to wait for the right moment. The tape ended with his final words. "If you're listening, Evangeline, you've already stepped onto a path with no return. But don't be afraid. You are not alone." I sank onto the cold brick floor, clutching the recorder to my chest as though it were his arms around me again. That afternoon I carried the box of tapes upstairs. But before I could lock the door, Mason appeared. He leaned against the frame, a faint smirk on his lips. "You've been gone all morning," he said with a hint of curiosity. "Down in the tunnels again?" I half closed the notebook in my hands, forcing calm. "I'm uncovering what Grandfather left. What he left for you." Mason sneered. "Don't delude yourself." I met his gaze, filled with resolve. "Are you sure? If Grandfather didn't trust me, why would he make the safes code my birthday?" Mason froze. For a moment his smile vanished, tension breaking through. But then he recovered quickly, stepping into the room, his voice low and threatening. "You'd better stop. Our parents won't forgive this." "I don't need their forgiveness." Mason fell silent, anger and fear flickering in his eyes. He turned and slammed the door shut. That night I played another tape. Grandfather's voice was weaker now, but steady. "I know one day Gregory will try to erase the evidence. But I've prepared. Every document has a copy, stored where only Evangeline can find it." I clenched my fist, realizing I had become the final guardian of his legacy. The secrets in the chamber were not only evidence. They were his message to me, his belief that I would not falter. I arranged to meet attorney Charles Whitmore, Grandfather Henry's oldest friend and most loyal legal counsel, at his stately office in downtown Burlington. The limestone building had towering windows and carved wooden ceilings. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and polished wood, solemn and heavy. Charles was seated behind a massive walnut desk, his eyes bright behind round glasses. He rose when he saw me, shaking my hand firmly. "Evangeline, I knew you'd come. Maxwell always believed you would, sooner or later." I opened my leather bag, pulling out the files and the cassette tape. Setting them on the desk, I slid them toward him. "This is what I found in the underground chamber. The Prescott Foundation records and Grandfather's recordings." Charles silently opened the files, turning page after page. He didn't look surprised, only thoughtful, nodding now and then as though confirming what he already knew. At last he set his glasses down and looked at me intently. "You know, Maxwell prepared for this moment years ago. He feared Gregory and Vivian would tarnish the entire legacy, so he created a special mechanism." "What mechanism?" I asked, my heart racing. "Full control of the Prescott Foundation along with most of the undisclosed assets will pass to you. But there is one condition." I held my breath, waiting for him to continue. "You must prove your resolve. Not by finding these documents, but by daring to bring them into the light. Maxwell wanted the whole world, and especially your family, to see the truth." "I will have to face them openly?" "That's right. I will arrange an official disclosure with witnesses and the press present. Once the information is out, no one can deny it or twist it." "Are you sure this is the only way?" Charles smiled faintly, though sadness tinged his expression. "Maxwell didn't want his legacy buried in the dark for another generation. He chose you, Evangeline. He believed you had the courage to withstand the pressure." I lowered my head, letting the tears rise. I'm so tired of being dismissed, called a dreamer and naive. If I stand up now, they'll call it betrayal. Charles handed me a handkerchief, his voice warm. Sometimes truth itself is betrayal to those who live on lies. But remember, once light is lit, darkness has no power. Then, within a week, I'll send formal invitations to all heirs as well as several major news outlets. We'll do it properly by the law with no loopholes. The news spread quickly. At the next evening's dinner in the estate, tension hung thick in the air. My father slammed his glass on the table, his voice like a gavel. You gave what you found to Whitmore, didn't you? I did what's right. Grandfather left them to me and I can't pretend I never saw them. My mother sat rigid, her thin lips pressed into a sharp line. Evangeline, do you realize what you're doing? You'll turn this family into a public joke. No, mother. I answered slowly. What you and father did is what made us a joke. Mason sneered, shaking his head. And you think the press will believe you over them? They are the Prescotts. They have prestige connections. Mason, if that prestige is built on fraud and lies, then it's rotten from within. He started to retort, but father raised a hand to silence him. His eyes burned into me. Fine. If you want to stand against us, you'll regret it. The Prescotts have never lost a battle. I didn't bow my head. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. A few days later, I went back to Charles's office to prepare for the announcement. He handed me the plan. There will be 3 witnesses. Myself, Harold, Maxwell's closest friend, and Marta, the longtime housekeeper. In addition, local media and several major papers from New York will attend. I skimmed the list, my heart pounding. My parents, they'll try to ruin it. Charles nodded. They might exert pressure, even hire lawyers to deny it. But don't forget, you have the recordings. Maxwell's voice is undeniable proof. I gripped the files in my hands, trembling yet filled with strength. In my mind echoed grandfather's words once whispered on the old porch. A house is more than brick walls. It's where the truth is kept. And I knew this time I would not let the truth stay hidden behind walls. The news of the upcoming disclosure had barely settled when my parents and Mason struck back. The days that followed felt like a storm building, silent waves crashing against my life. First, they cut off the family financial support I had still been receiving. It wasn't much, but it helped sustain my small architecture office in Burlington. The bank secretary called to inform me the account was closed, her voice apologetic. I'm sorry, Evangeline. The order came directly from Mr. Gregory Prescott. I set the phone down, bitter and amused all at once. For years they used money like chains, and now they thought I would collapse once it was pulled away. But worse came quickly. One morning I received an email from Greenland Realty, the company that had just awarded me a contract to design a sustainable housing project. One that could have kept my office secure for years. The project director wrote, "We regret to cancel the contract." After receiving information from the Prescott family that Ms. Evangeline suffers from psychological issues and financial instability, the board had to reconsider. I read the line again and again, my stomach twisting. It wasn't hard to guess who was behind it. And I was right. My phone rang, Mason's smug voice on the line. Did you really think you could fight the family? One call from me and you lose everything. Mason, you can take the contract, but you can't take the truth. The truth will speak for itself. He scoffed, then hung up. The days that followed grew harder. Employees at my office grew nervous, some resigning out of fear. Tabloids began running insinuations. Prescott daughter unstable, strange behavior reported. Headlines like that flooded online, leaving me sick with anger. I started doubting myself. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was destroying everything by clinging to grandfather's legacy. But at my lowest, a message appeared. Heard you're in trouble. If you need technical support, call me. Thomas Hayes, the environmental engineer I had worked with on an eco-housing project in Vermont 2 years ago. We had worked so seamlessly, understanding each other with a glance at the drawings. After that project, he moved to Boston for a corporate job and we lost touch. I called immediately. His voice was warm with the same familiar humor. I guess Mason hasn't changed. Still prefers dirty tricks over real skill? I laughed. The first laugh in days. Still the same. But this time he doesn't want to outdo me, he wants to destroy me. Then let's destroy their game instead. Remember the old sketches Henry left in the library? The yellow drawings. Grandfather's visions of green architecture from his youth. I still have them. But they're faded, hard to read, some barely legible. Perfect. Send them to me. I'll digitize and restore them. Then we'll turn them into a real project. Nothing is more convincing than proving you're the rightful heir by building Henry's vision. A few days later, Thomas drove from Boston to Burlington, bringing a large format scanner. He spread the drawings across my office floor, carefully adjusting every line and symbol. Watching him work, I felt relief. Finally, a true ally. You know, Thomas looked up. Henry once told me at a meeting, Evangeline sees what I once saw in my youth, a world where people live in harmony with nature. I broke down, bowing my head over the sketches. And yet my parents called it childish fantasy. Then make it reality. When the press asks, don't argue. Show them the designs, the projects, the values Henry fought for. His words reignited my faith. That afternoon, as late sunlight poured through the windows, Thomas handed me a fully restored drawing. It was a design for a sustainable lakeside community, powered by solar energy and natural water recycling. The scrawled but strong handwriting in the corner remained, Prescott Green Vision, 1978. My hands shook as I touched grandfather's letters. This will be the answer to everything. Not words, not arguments, but living proof. Thomas nodded. Exactly. And I'll be here to build it with you. The day of the announcement arrived. The atmosphere in the Grand Hotel Hall in downtown Burlington was denser than ever. In the front rows were reporters from major outlets like the Boston Globe, the New York Times, even a regional television crew. Cameras flashed constantly, bursts of light flickering across the deep red carpet. I sat in the front row, both hands resting on the documents I had spent sleepless nights preparing. Beside me, Attorney Charles Whitmore remained calm, the light reflecting off his glasses. He gave me a slight nod as if to steady me. The doors of the hall burst open. My parents entered in elegant attire, followed by Mason and a man I didn't know, their private lawyer. The room stirred immediately. My mother lifted her chin, her forced smile straining to project confidence. My father clutched a folder tightly, his eyes sweeping the room as if to assert dominance. Once everyone settled, Charles rose, his voice steady. Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to disclose an important part of Mr. Henry Prescott's legacy. At once, my father cut in, his tone sharp as a blade. I object to this proceeding. My daughter, Evangeline, has no legal standing. Henry would never hand control of the family's assets to a naive dreamer. Their lawyer stood as well, adding, we demand this announcement be suspended. My clients, Gregory and Vivian Prescott, are the rightful heirs. The hall erupted with murmurs. Some reporters bent low to scribble notes, others raised cameras toward me. If my parents want to speak of legitimacy, then let the truth speak. I pulled the old recorder from my bag, set it on the table. Static buzzed, then Grandfather Henry's voice rang clear, deep and firm. I discovered Gregory and Vivian taking money from the Prescott Foundation to cover massive debts. I kept silent, waiting for Evangeline to be grown enough to uncover the truth. She alone will continue this legacy. The words echoed through the room, heavy as a gavel. My parents' faces shifted. My mother went pale, her lips trembling, while my father's face flushed red, his eyes blazing. Mason leapt up, shouting over the uproar. This is staged. She faked that tape. Grandfather would never say that. Charles calmly raised his hand, signaling the witnesses to step forward. Harold, Grandfather's lifelong friend, approached the microphone. I heard Henry say these very things. This is no forgery. He prepared these tapes years ago in case the family tried to hide the truth. Next came Marta, the longtime housekeeper, her eyes brimming with tears. I watched Mr. Henry lock those tapes in the safe. He told me, one day Evangeline will find them. She's the last hope. The hall erupted again. Camera flashes strobed, reporters raised their hands for questions. My parents' lawyer tried to steady the ground. These witnesses could be biased. We will not acknowledge them. But Charles cut in firmly. Legal documents, recordings, and witnesses are more than sufficient. And under Henry's provisions, if the family continues to deny, all undisclosed assets, estimated at tens of millions, will transfer directly to the Vermont Community Fund. My mother staggered, clutching the chair for balance. My father gripped the armrest, jaw locked. Mason shouted again, "You can't do this. Prescott belongs to us. No one can take it away." Charles's voice rang out, unwavering. "Wrong. Prescott belongs to the truth. And the truth has been proven." The air in the hall after the recording played was like the aftermath of an explosion. Whispers, camera clicks, reporters' frantic pens, all merged into a wall of sound. At the microphone, I lingered, trembling inside, yet grandfather's words echoed in my head. "Evangeline, you must be brave." Then my mother, the woman who had always worn her icy mask, collapsed into a chair. She covered her face, her shoulders shaking. And then she wept, the sound ripping apart her years of composure. "True. Gregory did it." Her voice cracked. I knew all along, but I stayed silent. I was afraid. Afraid of losing our reputation. Afraid of scorn. Afraid of watching Mason and Evangeline grow up in disgrace. All eyes turned to her. Some reporters stopped writing, simply watching. My throat tightened. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother cry. "Mother," I whispered, but she didn't look at me. Her tears smeared her flawless makeup, leaving her fragile, almost unrecognizable. Mason shot up, his chair clattering loudly. He glared at her with disgust. "What are you doing? Confessing before this mob? You've shamed us worse than father's fraud ever could." He spun toward me, his eyes burning, his voice a growl. "This is all your fault, Evangeline. I swear, I will never forgive you." I clenched my fists but didn't flinch from his glare. To me, Mason no longer looked like the brilliant heir my parents worshipped, but like a furious child whose world had crumbled. Rigid in his seat, my father gripped the chair. He said nothing, his face ashen, eyes hollow. Gregory Prescott, the man who had once entered every room with icy confidence, now looked like a cracked statue watching his world collapse. A reporter stood, calling out, "Mr. Gregory, do you confirm your wife's confession?" His lips moved, but no sound came. His silence was the heaviest answer of all. I stepped away from the microphone, walking slowly back to my seat. My mother lifted her tear-stained face, trembling. "Evangeline, I'm sorry." For years I had longed to hear those words. But now they cut deeper than any wound. "You feared losing reputation. But you let father betray grandfather, betray his legacy. What is a reputation worth if it's built on lies?" Mother sobbed harder, her shoulders collapsing. Mason threw me one last hateful glare, then stormed out. His shadow vanished in the flashing lights, leaving only the echo of his bitter oath. My father stayed motionless. As I passed him, I caught the flicker of his eyes. He couldn't look at me. The man who once declared, "This family exists because of my decisiveness," now sat like a captain without a rudder in a storm. Reporters rushed with questions, pens scratching furiously. Charles took the podium, his voice strong. "Ladies and gentlemen, the truth is clear. Henry Prescott foresaw this. According to his will, all control of the Prescott Foundation passes to Evangeline Prescott. If the family continues to resist, every undisclosed asset will go to the community fund." After that day, the press wouldn't stop reporting. The Prescott name splashed across front pages of major papers, no longer tied to wealth and power but to fraud, secret legacy, and the unexpected heir. In his office, Charles was seated across from me, laying out the choices. "Evangeline, you have every right to take Gregory to court. The evidence is overwhelming. If you want, he could face trial and heavy penalties." In my mind, I saw father's frozen face, mother's collapse, Mason storming out. I could seek revenge, drag them into court as criminals. But grandfather's words returned. "A house is more than brick walls. It's where the truth is kept. No, I won't take him to court." Charles frowned slightly but didn't interrupt. I went on, "If I do, this family will be destroyed forever, and what grandfather wanted for the community will sink into legal battles. I don't want the truth to be trapped in a courtroom. I want it to become change." "You mean?" "I will keep all assets within the Prescott Foundation as grandfather intended. The small portion left for my parents and Mason, I will allow them to keep, but only under conditions." The family meeting took place in the grand dining hall, the same room that once echoed with comparisons and invisible verdicts against me. This time I occupied the head of the table. My parents and Mason faced me from the other side. My father remained silent, his face hollow, eyes empty. My mother looked worn, her makeup no longer masking the lines of age. Mason leaned back in his chair, feigning defiance, but his eyes betrayed unease. I looked at each of them in turn, then spoke slowly. I have enough power to take father to court. I could also let every cent flow straight into the community fund, leaving the family with nothing. Mason slammed his spoon down, his voice hard. What do you want? For us to kneel before you? I placed both hands on the table, my tone steady. I don't want revenge. But I want this family to relearn how to live. If you want to keep the small portion left, you, father and mother, must take part in community service within the Prescott Foundation projects. No more lavish parties, no more hiding behind reputation. Every dollar kept must be earned with real work. My mother stared at me in shock. Evangeline, you're forcing me to do community labor? It's not punishment. It's an opportunity. For years we've lived on a glittering shell, using money to hide the truth. Now it's time to relearn what it means to build. Mason let out a bitter laugh. You think you can force us to pick up trash, dig dirt like commoners? I think it's the only way you'll understand the true value of work. If you don't want to, you can walk away from everything. My father lifted his eyes, focusing on me for the first time. His voice was hoarse. Evangeline, you truly want your father, at this age, to go out and do community service? I clenched my fists but kept my tone calm. You once said this family exists because of your decisiveness. Then be decisive once more. This time to hold on to something truly worthy. Silence filled the room. I saw Mason turn his face away, his jaw tight with strain. My mother bowed her head. And my father stayed motionless, as if staring into a mirror after decades of self-delusion. At last he exhaled heavily, his trembling hand resting on the table. If this is the only way. I agree. My mother lifted her gaze, her eyes red. She said nothing, only nodded. Mason shoved his chair back, storming out without a word. 6 months passed faster than I expected. The Prescott estate, once a symbol of power and shallow glamour, now wore an entirely different face. The old stone walls remained, but inside were research rooms filled with natural light, solar panels gleaming on the roof, and a lush experimental garden stretching to the fence line. On the day the Green Architecture Research Center opened, I remained on the front steps, watching streams of young people arrive. Architecture students, environmental engineers, even local townsfolk gathered for the first seminar. A curly-haired student clutching blueprints approached me, eyes shining. Evangeline, thank you for opening this opportunity. Here we get to experiment, to do what universities never allow. I smiled. It was Henry who planted the seed. I only nurtured it so it could grow. Mason vanished from the media after that public announcement. No more glowing articles, no more photos of him at high society galas. Rumors said he left the country. Others whispered he lived quietly in a small Boston apartment. I never tried to confirm. Deep down, I knew Mason hadn't let go of his hatred. But silence can also be an answer. My parents were different. Reluctantly, they joined the community programs run by the Prescott Foundation. On the first day, seeing my father, who once wore three-piece suits at multimillion-dollar negotiations, now working with young people to clear a vacant lot for planting trees, I felt a lump in my throat. My mother, once accustomed to crystal-lit banquets, now stood in a community kitchen, serving food to the homeless. At first they resisted, clumsy and awkward. But slowly I noticed small changes. One afternoon, passing by the community garden, I saw my father bend to gather fallen branches, sweat soaking his forehead, his expression no longer filled with anger. He glanced at me briefly, then turned away without a word. A small gesture, but I understood. The proud facade was cracking. My mother was different. She rarely spoke to me, but once, while we were at a clothing drive for children in the mountains, she sighed softly. Perhaps I was too afraid of what people thought. I lived my whole life in the eyes of others so much that I forgot those closest to me. One autumn afternoon, I paused before the estate, gazing at the old bricks stained with time. The wind carried the scent of dry maple leaves, laughter from students echoed through the yard. I touched the cold stone, feeling as if I touched memory itself. This place had witnessed lies and tears, but now it bore witness to rebirth. Thomas appeared, carrying a stack of new plans. He looked at me and smiled gently. Did you know, Evangeline, this center has already been approached by 3 green research funds in New York and San Francisco for collaboration? Good. Because here still holds what Henry left behind. And when it's recognized, nothing can deny it. Thomas looked at me, his eyes full of trust. In that moment, I knew grandfather would be smiling. The Prescott estate was no longer a symbol of false power, but proof of something simple. Every house keeps the truth. And sometimes, that truth can save even the most lost souls. One late winter evening, as thin snow blanketed the garden, I wandered into the old Prescott Library. It had been transformed into a reading room for students and researchers, but one corner of stone wall remained untouched. I laid my hand on the cold bricks, the warm lamp casting my shadow long across the floor. My eyes caught a faint carving in the stone, hidden behind a shelf long removed. I shone my flashlight closer, my heart tightening. True legacy isn't built on lies. It's built on courage. The words, rough but resolute, carved by hand. No explanation needed. I knew Henry had left this message, a wordless will. Just then Thomas entered, bringing the cold wind of the corridor. He saw me frozen there and asked, "What is it?" I pointed at the carving. His eyes lit up. Henry really prepared everything. Not papers, not files, but even marks within these very walls. He once told me, "A house keeps what people want to hide." Now I understand he wasn't only talking about funds or assets. Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice warm. "And you've proven it. No one can deny it anymore." The next day, while guiding a group of new students through the center, I brought them to that corner. A young woman paused, reading the words aloud with a trembling voice. A young man whispered, "It feels like a message meant for us." I looked at them, smiling. "That's right. Don't forget, every structure you build carries a piece of your own courage." Their eyes lit up, and in that moment I felt grandfather's presence, watching us kindly, smiling because the seed he planted had finally grown. That evening, after everyone left, I returned once more. I lowered myself into the old wooden chair, gazing at the carved words, my heart swelling with something indescribable. I remembered the day my parents collapsed before the public, Mason stormed off in rage, and all the nights I spent in the dark basement with blurred records. Without those pains, would I have had the courage to stand here today? I whispered softly as if speaking to grandfather, "I didn't just inherit assets. I inherited the courage to live by them." The wind whistled through the window cracks as if answering. I closed my eyes, letting memories, pain, and hope weave into one continuous stream. A single old line, carved hurriedly into cold stone, had been powerful enough to change a family's fate. It made me wonder, how many families out there are hiding truths no one dares to face? And if one day the shell cracked, would they have the courage to confront it? I tell this story not to boast nor to sow resentment. I only hope that as you listen you'll ask yourself, what is the true legacy you want to leave behind? Is it money, reputation, or the courage to live honestly? Have you ever experienced a moment when a single phrase, an event, or even a small detail made you re-examine your entire life? If you have, share it with me. Sometimes your story might be the light that helps someone else find their way out of darkness. And if you feel this story has touched your heart, don't forget to follow the channel to hear more journeys. Stories of family, of secrets hidden behind closed doors, and of the strength of courage, they're all waiting ahead. Because sometimes, one story alone is enough to change how we see our very own family.